WhatsApp 0555561034. Today is World Asthma Day, and today we're joined in studio by two specialist doctors. One is here now, we'll wait for the other, but I'm in studio now with Dr. Vishnu Abayate, who is a senior resident, respiratory medicine department of medicine and therapeutics for the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. He'll provide us with insights on this chronic respiratory disease affecting millions of people nationwide. And so at the end of this interview, we'll be discussing all the developments in asthma management and also the key things to look out for, and also the triggers and how not to trigger them. Good morning, welcome to the show. Good morning, Dr. Abayate. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And so, usually when is World Asthma Day? What are the general questions that people ask you?
Okay, so usually World Asthma Day is a day that was instituted by the Global Initiative for Asthma, which we call GINA.
Okay.
And GINA is like an organization by the WHO, and they are responsible for ensuring that everybody is abreast with asthma care. They are also responsible for advocacy of asthma.
Okay.
So they encourage local societies like the Ghana Thoracic Society on World Asthma Day to hold events like what we are having, this media encounter. Then later in the day this year, the Ghana Thoracic Society has decided to use the World Asthma Day to launch its asthma guidelines. So the event will be happening this afternoon. So during World Asthma Day, people want to know what is asthma, what are some of the things that they can do to make sure that they live a normal life whilst they have asthma.
Okay. Right. So do people still think or believe that asthma, are the myths that surround asthma, are they still there? Do people still think it's a curse?
Yeah, it's still there because
really? In 2023.
It's still there. In 2023, you'll be amazed the perceptions that people have about asthma, and it's basically because the level of literacy in the country, even though it's gone up, it's still quite low as compared to the developed countries. So some people still think that if my child has asthma, the person has been cursed. Some people think that asthma is not an orthodox disease, it's a local disease. So somebody has asthma, instead of bringing the person to the hospital for treatment, they would rather prefer to send the person to either the fetish priest or the prayer camp. You know, so it's still there, it still persists. And that's why we are doing this advocacy, to let people know that asthma can be treated and you can live a near normal life with asthma.
Okay. So what is asthma to the lay person?
Sure. So for the lay person, in a layman terms, so asthma basically is a condition in which you have what we call chronic inflammation of the airways. So as a result of this chronic inflammation, from time to time, when the airway comes into contact, that in normal people will not evoke any response, this causes the what we call narrowing.
There's an image on our screen now.
Yeah, so that's the airways that we breathe through. So you can see that in asthma, in normal people, usually the airway should be open, so that when you breathe in, air can freely flow into the airways and goes into your lungs so that you can breathe very well. So what you have on your left is a normal airway. But if you look on the right, you can see that the walls of the airway are thickened. And this is as a result of the chronic inflammation that goes on. So once somebody who has this, what we call hyper-responsive airway, comes into contact with a trigger or an allergen, then the airways narrow, or what you call bronchoconstriction. So it becomes difficult for the person.
Is this an example?
Yes, this is an example. So you can see that the space within the airway is quite tight. So if the person has to now breathe out, it becomes very difficult because the space is so narrow. And as a result of the narrowing of the space, when they breathe out, it makes a noise, which we call a wheeze. So usually people say, asthmatic, they are breathing and it's making okay, so that's what we call a wheeze. So basically, this narrowing of the airway causes symptoms, which is difficulty in breathing, cough, chest tightness, and wheezing. The difference between, there are a lot of other conditions that can give you some of these symptoms. But the difference between those and asthma is that, for instance, somebody who has heart failure, usually when they have difficulty in breathing, until they get treatment, it tends to be progressive. But in asthma, on its own, the disease, the symptoms can go down, then they come, they have periods where the symptoms are worse, and they have periods where they can be symptom free. So we say that usually they tend to have variable symptoms. Okay, so that's what at times distinguishes the symptoms that they have from other conditions. So in general terms, asthma is a condition where you have inflammation. It's usually chronic inflammation of the airway, which leads to narrowing of the airway when they come into contact with a trigger, which gives them the symptoms of the difficulty in breathing or shortness of breath, and the wheezing and the chest tightness and the cough.
Okay. Now, Doc, before we talk the triggers, is asthma genetic?
So when it comes to asthma, usually when you say something is purely genetic, then it means that, okay, there is some genetic abnormality that leads to the disease.
Okay.
But when it comes to asthma, there is no one single cause. Like I said, this is what causes it. There are a myriad of factors, and biological basis or genetic basis also forms part.
Right.
So we think it's an interplay between the genetic or biological factor and the environment. So somebody who has a family history of asthma, is more likely to have asthma. But then you know people who their family they have asthma, but they don't have. Yeah, so usually an interplay between the biological or genetic factors and the environment. So you can't say that asthma is purely genetic, but it has some biological or genetic components.
Right. So what triggers it? And does your environment cause a trigger?
Okay. Yeah, so as we established, people have asthma have what we call chronic airway inflammation. So it makes their airway very hyper responsive.
Okay.
So there are certain things that somebody who doesn't have an hyper responsive airway can come into contact with and will not experience any symptoms like asthmatic. So for instance, for most asthmatics, they will tell you that, okay, when I come into contact with dust, then I start having the symptoms. Or when somebody sprays a perfume or any strong scented object, then they have it triggers it. Some also, there are some whose symptoms are triggered by food, even excessive emotions, laughing, crying.
If you overlaugh, you can trigger your asthma attack.
Yeah, it's possible. So there are cases where people have asthma, and because of that, when they are laughing, this is like by the side, and the person is laughing, and he's not laughing out loud. So you do because usually when he laughs out loud,
it's going to trigger
symptoms. So usually he tries to control it. Other triggers too are like attacks when people have what we call colds. They have viral respiratory infection. It also triggers it. Then in homes we have this small insects. We call them house dust mites. So
we call them what?
House dust mites. Small insects in the homes. They are very ubiquitous. They are in a lot of. They are almost everywhere. Okay. So they
is there a local name?
Unfortunately, I don't know the local name. So their feces, urine will spoil your beddings and all those things. So usually when people get into contact with them, it also triggers their asthma. So these are some of the triggers. There are a lot: smoke, cigarette smoke, fumes for car exhaust, all those can. Even domestic fire can also, smokes from firewood and the rest can trigger the asthma for some people.
Okay.
So it's important that as an asthmatic, or even most of you, if you have any allergy, you try and look out for the triggers. So at times when you avoid the triggers, it helps with your symptoms and your normal function.
Okay. So in all of these, Doc, which trigger do we see? Which trigger is most common?
So
which causes is most common?
So for the trigger, usually most of the studies have looked at the house dust mite.
Okay.
So usually also comes with the dust.
You need to give us the local name so we start looking for that. But what did you say it was again?
House dust mite. So I'll ask around and get the local
house dust mite.
Yes. So look for the local name so that it will help us in the education.
Guys, can you join our conversation if you are watching us and you know the local name for house dust mite? Let us know. Our WhatsApp is very active on 05555661034. This is the biggest trigger of asthma.
Yes, it's the commonest.
The commonest here in Ghana or Accra.
So unfortunately, Ghana, we've not done studies to look at it. So, but usually at times you can extrapolate data from other places where they've done the study. So extensively, it tends to be the commonest trigger of asthma.
So do we have types of asthma, or it's just one type?
Okay, so technically speaking, asthma is considered as a heterogeneous condition, which means that there are various forms of it. So in the past, we thought that it was one condition, okay, but then we know that now with the we've studied it over a very long time, we know that there are various forms of it. So the common one that people usually see is what we call the allergic asthma, which tends to start in childhood. So usually kids who have history of allergy and the rest, then they will develop asthma. There are also what we call the adult onset asthma. There is occupational asthma. There are various types of asthma. So the common one that people usually are aware of is what we call the allergic asthma.
This is what the house dust mite looks like. Who knows the local name? Can we have it in Pruka. In Pruka. As well in Pruka. It's called in Pruka. Okay. What's it called in your local dialect? In Pruka. So yes, we are looking at what causes asthma and the triggers. The biggest trigger, the commonest trigger right now is this, the house dust mite. Okay, Doc, so what for somebody who who's suffering from asthma, what should be the telltale sign for the person to know that, look, I'm about to have an attack? Do people who suffer from this condition feel it inside? Okay,
so usually, as I said, for the symptoms, most of them usually, when they are having the asthma attack, will have some chest tightness. They will start to wheeze. But really, until the attack starts coming on, there is really nothing for them to know that, okay, this is the asthma attack is coming on or not. But usually when the attack has started, they will have some chest tightness, difficulty in breathing, then they start wheezing. So usually for most of the patients, we educate them on these things. And also for people, for instance, if somebody's attack is triggered by viral respiratory tract infections, they will know that, okay, usually when I have a viral respiratory tract infection, my asthma is triggered. So we give them what we call asthma action plan, so that they know that, okay, once I'm going to have a viral respiratory tract infection, I need to use this inhaler, to prevent it from getting worse.
Okay, so back to the screen. My viewers are joining us. Danny says, good morning. What is the difference between asthma and sinusitis? Which is more severe?
Okay, so basically sinusitis, we have the sinuses around the nostrils, the eye, and all those things. They are opening there. So sinusitis basically means that any inflammation of the sinuses. You can have infectious causes of sinusitis and allergic causes of sinusitis. But asthma, basically you are looking at inflammation of the main airway, not the sinuses. So that's basically the difference. And also usually asthma is not typically an infectious, there is no infectious cause of the asthma. So that's the difference.
Okay. My viewer is joining us. Good morning. Kaf, please ask the doctor for me. Can someone develop asthma as he or she ages? This is Efo Gavivina from North Legon. It's Valerie here. Good morning, Kaf.
Okay.
Doc.
So as I indicated, so there is a type of asthma called adult onset asthma. And asthma can start at any age. So if somebody develops asthma later in age, we classify it as adult onset asthma. So yes, you can develop asthma in later age. Even some people old age, they are diagnosed with asthma. Okay,
Lamstaff has joined a conversation. He's telling us the local name for house dust mite, and it's Bagblaja. This, I believe, is
Ewe.
Yeah. Bagblaja.
Bagblaja is cockroach.
It's cockroach. Lamstaff, you are giving us wrong information. Okay, Doc. Also, how young can someone develop asthma? How young? What's the youngest person you've treated?
Okay, so for me, the youngest person I have treated is about 3 years old. But I know senior colleagues who have diagnosed people with asthma as young as 6 months old. You get it?
months
Yeah.
old.
So
Wow.
one shared his experience with us where he diagnosed somebody as young as 6 months old with asthma. But the youngest I have ever treated is around 3 years old.
Okay, 6 months. Wow. Okay, so let's talk medication and treatment. How do we go about it?
Okay, so it's important to make this point. Usually, people are more aware of the acute symptoms of asthma. So if you are not careful, most people end up focusing on the acute management of the asthma. But as we have established earlier, we know that it's a chronic condition. So like chronic, like hypertension, diabetes, once it's a chronic condition, you need to be on medications all the time. You get it. But because the acute presentation tends to be a little dramatic, people tend to focus on it. So somebody has an attack, he comes, they give him some medication. We call them salbutamol. That's the common name. They are nebulized, they are free, they write some oral steroids for them to take for some few days, and that is the end. But once you don't deal with the underlying chronic inflammation that is going on, such people will tend to have repeated what we call like attacks or exacerbations of the asthma. And research has shown that those who are not on chronic medication, they are more likely to have severe attacks, end up in the intensive care unit, and they are more likely to die from asthma. So apart from the acute, we recommend after assessment that everybody should be on regular medications, which we call controller. So when it comes to the asthma medications, we divide them into two: relievers and controller. So every asthmatic, once they qualify, should be on the reliever medication. Okay, and this reliever medication contains some medications which we call steroids, which helps to blunt down the inflammation going on in the airway, so that the airways don't go what we call remodeling to become fixed, and also they don't get the frequent and exacerbation, and it also prevents them from dying from asthma.
Okay. Do we have side effects from the medications, from these medications?
So usually,
and what are the side effects if there are?
Okay, so usually for the inhaled corticosteroids or the inhaled steroids that you take,
right,
if you are taking it well, usually it goes directly into the lungs. And they are in small doses.
Is it the puff one?
Yes.
Okay, so when an asthmatic patient puffs it, can you give us a virtual picture of what's happening as soon as the medication goes in there? What happens?
Okay, so usually if you've seen them, they are supposed to coordinate their breathing in, breathing out, so that once they puff in, they are able to take it in such a way that it goes straight into the lungs. So for most asthmatic, if asthmatic tells you that, oh, I've taken the inhaler, but I'm tasting the medication in my mouth, then you know that the person is not taking it well. So you have to go. So usually when they come to the clinic, those are some of the things that we do. We go over the inhaler technique to make sure that they are taking it well. Okay, so once they are taking it well and the medication is going into the lungs, they don't tend to get the, how they call it, the side effects. You see, it's those who have the acute exacerbation or those who take what we call the oral steroids, they may have some of the side effects. But then some of the components of the inhalers can cause some things like maybe your heart will beat a little fast, they may have some tremors and the rest. But for the inhaled ones, once you are following the inhaler technique, they don't tend to get major side effects. Okay, I don't want to dwell on the side effects too much, because in my practice at times you mention side effects, people don't appreciate it very well, and because of that they decide that they are not going to take the medication. And when we talk about side effects of medication, it doesn't mean that everybody taking the medication will get a side effect. Yes, it's only most people, majority of people who will take the medication may never develop the side effects. But we let people know, so that in case you develop it, then you come back quickly, then we review the medication for you. So I just want to take this opportunity that side effects should not be a deterrent for taking medication, because majority of people will not develop. If your medication causes so much side effects, it won't get approved for use in the general population.
Okay. Doc, how about alternative medicines? Which ones are recommended? Are they recommended, and do people tend to abuse such?
So I mean, generally people have the choice, but if you follow most guidelines are what we call evidence-based. So they employ the best available evidence as we speak today. Okay, so as we speak today, the mainstay of asthma treatment is the ones I spoke about. Then corticosteroids for the long-term management,
Right.
plus what we call some other drugs. We call them long-acting beta agonists. They also help in opening up the airway. So now there are some inhalers that combine the corticosteroids with the long-acting beta agonists. Then the short-acting ones in case they have exacerbation. Generally, these are the ones that most of the guidelines recommend. And we practice orthodox medicine, so we hardly, unless you come and show us overwhelming evidence that, oh, I have this alternative medicine that works, we will look at it. If we look at it and the evidence is good, then, but as we speak now, most of the guidelines don't recommend those ones as a main form of treatment. Okay. You can add some like yoga, they have some acupuncture and all those ones. They can add them as adjunctive, but they should never be the mainstay of treatment. Okay.
Okay, dokes. Alhaji Dauda is joining our conversation, and Alhaji Dauda is asking, do we now have a vaccine for asthma?
So vaccines usually are used to prevent infection. So we established that asthma is not an infectious disease, so there is no vaccine for asthma. Okay, but what I would like to say that, I mean, asthma is not a contraindication to vaccination. So if you are asthmatic and you need to have your vaccinations done, you can discuss it with your doctor which vaccine you want to take, then they will advise you accordingly.
Okay, Morgan from Ahafo, Kenya says, join our conversation. He wants some free consultation. Hello, BFS, good morning. Please, I get cold and continuous sneezing every morning, especially when I'm exposed to the fan, standing or ceiling, or when exposed to any form of dusty particles, stroke mites. How is this science related to asthma?
Okay. So I think he's talking more of sneezing and the rest. He's not speaking about the classic symptoms that we mentioned, like the chest tightness, the shortness of breath, and the rest. I mean, I didn't get his age and all those things, so it will be very difficult to, without all the full information, come out and say he has this. But the symptoms he suggests looks more like what we call allergic rhinitis, and not like asthma.
Okay, and so, Doc, in shedding light on World Asthma Day, what are some of the activities that have been lined up today to put more light on the day and the condition?
The Ghana Thoracic Society this afternoon at Alisa Hotel at 2 p.m. will be launching the National Asthma Guidelines for Ghana. Right. So as I said, initially I mentioned about GINA. So GINA usually produces a guideline for every country in the world. But the Ghana Thoracic Society, which is a grouping of experts who are involved in the management of respiratory conditions, has come together. Most of the experts who are part of the Ghana Thoracic Societies and experts from other institutions. You have experts from the universities, the teaching hospitals, the regional hospitals, and even some district hospitals came together and they've written a guideline. So the guidelines basically is to guide all of us, because for instance, if you are in Accra and you are in my hometown and your mom, how you should be managed for asthma should not practically be different. Okay, it should be about the same. So that's the essence of the guidelines. We want to bridge the gap that some people in certain parts of the country may be having the best evidence-based asthma management, when somebody who is in a village may not be getting it. So we'll be launching the guideline this afternoon at Alisa Hotel, and we invite everybody who can join us to be there for the launch. Okay,
what time does it begin, please?
It begins at 2 p.m.
2 p.m.
2 p.m.
Thank you.
Asante Hall, Alisa Hotel.
Asante Hall, Alisa Hotel, 2 p.m. And that's where you need to be this afternoon for all you need to know on World Asthma Day and the guidelines that are going to be launched. We've been having a conversation on asthma and all we need to know and the triggers and how to prevent all of these with Dr. Vishnu Abayate, who is a senior resident, respiratory medicine, Department of Medicine and Therapeutics at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and he's been our doctor for today. Thank you for staying on. This is a birthday message from Prince. Prince is in our sound department here at GTV. He's wishing his friend Mark Owusu of UTV a blessed birthday, and this is a special one from all of us here at the team to Mr. William Amuna. We know you're doing the watching. Good morning. Coming up next is sports with multi-T sider Sadiq, the Liverpool chick, who'll be bringing us the latest in sports. We'll take a break. We'll be right back.